Hi, caregiver. Most falls for elders don't happen because someone's careless. The hazards around a home can be hiding in plain sight. In this video, I'm going to be talking with Susie Marsh all about ways to keep your loved ones safe in their own home and when they're visiting you. A quick disclaimer. The information discussed in this video is sourced from public records and industry databases. We do not support, encourage, or engage in doxing, nor do we reveal private contact or address information for any individual, company, or organization. Hello, everybody. Hi, caregivers. I want to welcome my guest, Susie Marsh from Susie's organization, Solutions LLC. Susie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. And I want to say that today we're going to be talking about a lot of things, primarily helping our loved ones live in a safer home, dealing with that emotional separation of items that we may truly love but may not be able to keep anymore. And then also giving caregivers some tips and tricks on how to take maybe the 5 minutes that they have in a day to just maybe clean up some things. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's begin with the importance of a clutter-free environment for seniors. Why is maintaining a safe, clutter-free environment for our loved ones, our elders, so important?
Well, number one, I think one of the things I look for when I go into a senior's home is what's the pathways look like? You know, is it open? Is it lots of piles? Is it by the entry where there's all kinds of things that have been dropped? It's just a health and safety thing that I look at. With my background as a social worker, I kind of have that always front and center when I go into a senior spaces. But if there's way too much clutter, if there's rugs in the way, if there's things that they're going to trip over, those are the first things I usually identify and think, okay, let's talk about those areas. And are those the hot spots, the drop zones? And then I talk to them and then I find out from them, usually when I do an assessment, who's the family that's involved? Do you have family members that are coming in and doing caregiving? Or is it friends? Or is it an agency that's coming in and doing the care? So then I tailor my support in services that I do with the organization and decluttering and downsizing based on that.
Okay. And what are, in your opinion, what are the hot spots? What are the things that cause the most danger for an elder in their home?
So entryways, definitely, because many times I find they'll say, Susie, you know, I went shopping today to get groceries and I am exhausted. And a lot of times when they get in the door, they drop everything right there because they're like, I'll just put it away later. I'll just get to it later. And later doesn't happen a lot of times. So it just starts piling up around the door area. Of course, that's where a lot of times we have our things like our keys and our wallets and purses and that kind of thing ends up right in that spot too. So that can cause more clutter in that area too. And then if there's any challenges like chronic disorganization challenges, which I can go into more detail too, the flat surfaces seem to be a hot spot for a lot of seniors. And that's just because that's the area that's easiest to get to, the floors, and that's that flat surface. Countertops usually have lots of clutter over top of them, and partly because they can't reach up high anymore either. And they can't get up to those upper cabinets, and so everything starts to get lower and lower and lower, and then you start seeing the clutter pile on those surfaces. And then usually around where they sit a lot, like if it's their recliner chair or by their computer or whatever, you usually see lots of clutter around that area because that's where they are all the time. They may have all their personal care stuff. They may have their computer, their writing materials, their fun stuff that they like to do, their knitting, their crocheting, their coloring, whatever it will be. Those are the typical ones that I see are all the flat surfaces throughout the house and then where they are most of the time.
Okay, so can you go further into the chronic disorganization syndrome for us, please?
Yeah, so chronic disorganization is typically more severe than what somebody would have with just being just kind of disorganized, just some clutter here and around in their house. And the designation is, well, let me back up a little bit. So as a professional organizer, I'm part of different organizations. So one of them is NAPO, which is our National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. Big mouthful, short acronym, NAPO. The other offshoot off of that, where there's professional organizers that work a lot with what's called chronic disorganization, which is like an umbrella term. If you think of like dementia is like an umbrella term for things like Alzheimer's and Lewy body and vascular dementia. Chronic disorganization is kind of the term that's over top of that. And so things like ADHD or ADD, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and aging and older adults is falling under that category as well. So with chronic disorganization, that adds a little bit more to what the struggles may be for a senior. So if they're dealing with the aging process itself, physical challenges, and then they also may have the mental health challenges, that is the aspect that I tend to specialize in. And I belong to the Institute for Challenging Disorganization, and it's ICD for short. And they have a wealth of information on their website, a public-facing view, as well as for subscribers like me. But with chronic disorganization, you have to look at things more in depth than just going in and redoing somebody's pantry. You have to look to see, okay, how does their brain work? How does their body work? And what do I need to do to adapt their environment to make it more usable, functional for that person? So not all professional organizers have the background in chronic disorganization. I started in 2007 with my business. I was a social worker working with persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And I worked with seniors. I started my internship as a social worker working with seniors, and now I've come full circle, 35, 40 years later, working with seniors again, because I love it. And I just found that was my niche, like almost immediately once I came out and became a professional organizer. I'm like, oh, well, my social work degree is very helpful in the work that I do.
And really, honestly, you still are being a social worker. In just a different capacity. But actually, I think it's a more impactful capacity because you're really hands-on changing lives. So
Yes.
For people who don't have the very like strong disorganization, or for people who do, what tips, because I know through your vast experience, you've got these kind of like layers of what these people can do or what anybody can do in order to find ways to organize. So is there anything that a caregiver can utilize, kind of like a top tips type thing, to maybe help their loved one start to declutter and maybe find those things? Because I know with ADD in particular, you don't see it, so you forget you have it, so you buy another one. And a lot of people have that. So out of sight, out of mind. How can people kind of like help their loved ones maybe start to curtail dropping the groceries at the door, leaving the canned goods on the counter, and like taking that time to put things away? Or what are your tips for that kind of, starting somebody to help them if they don't have that professional assistance like you are?
Well, I usually tell people to start by just looking at their spaces first. Are they overflowing? Are they full? Because if your cabinets are full already and you bring new food into the home, then where is it going to go? It just stays on the floor and on the counters. So number one, just go into those cabinets and look to see, is there a lot of expired food in there or things that you don't like to eat anymore? Maybe, as being a caregiver, they're taking care of their mom and you're like, Mom, when's the last time you ate that type of soup? Is that something you like anymore? And if she says no, then if it's way expired, of course you're going to toss it. I like to, when I'm sorting with clients, I'll say, hey, if it's like within the last year or two, some of the food pantries are actually taking some of that because there is so much need out there. They're not going with the really, really strict rules. So it's per pantry, of course, so you have to check. But I say, okay, pull those things out and see if they can get donated. Or even sometimes I go on to the, your local Facebook chatter groups in your neighborhoods. And I'll just put on there, I'm like, hey, I got some boxes of food that need to be distributed. Anybody in need? And then I'll say first come, first serve. And so people will come pick it up and disperse it. And then, like I said, I'll try to find pantries for that. But so that's usually the first step, is just looking to see what those spaces have that don't need to be there anymore. And then if it's where the senior, the person is struggling with getting up high, then let's look at some options lower. Do you need a rolling cart that's lower that they can use to put some of their canned goods on so they can access it easier? If they have room in their spaces to do that. And let's look to see how those shelves are set up. You always want to make sure that the least used items go up higher, the more used items go lower, because our main spaces are right here where everybody goes. You want to make sure everything that you use all the time is in that space. And when, there gets too much of the clutter on the countertops, then you got to think, okay, what can I do in this level that will give me more space? And sometimes it is like rolling carts or an extra cabinet that can be put in that space next to the countertop so that they can reach those things a little bit easier. So that's what I usually try to strategize when I'm in the space, just kind of seeing, okay, what things make sense to be in there and not be in there anymore. Yeah. And then just start small. Don't feel like you need to do a whole kitchen in a day, because that will take a lot of time. And as a caregiver, you're usually very busy doing the caregiving, right? And it's like, I don't have time to do that. Well, even if you schedule 10 to 15 minutes at a time in your schedule and write it down, so you make sure that you're hitting a spot every single day. And if it's okay, I'm going to pull out my silverware drawer and I'm going to see if there's other stuff in there that doesn't need to be there. Have your trash can handy with you or your recycling bin, and just start looking through it and just start tossing into those two bins. Because that's usually where people get stuck. They're like, then I have things in here that I don't want anymore. What do I do with it? Well, have a donate box sitting right next to you too, or a donate bag, and just have those things go right into that bag. And then the things that you're keeping in that drawer, that's where you take the utensil divider out and you clean that up a second and wipe the drawer down real quick, and then put the items back in that you want to keep. And you just do that little by little, so you don't feel like you're going to get overwhelmed by having to think, okay, I got to do this whole kitchen right now. Sometimes it's motivating for people and they're like, okay, I'm going to schedule myself an hour because I think I got an hour. I've got another family member that's doing some respite for me, or I have a respite facility that I'm able to take my loved one to. I'm going to, dive in and do this. Because the one thing that I do find is sometimes people will say to me, some of my clients, oh, well, my family will take care of this after I die. Mm-hmm. Oh, boy. Yep. I said, I don't know if you really want to do that to your family. And
I've heard that before.
What do you mean? They're going to like all my stuff? And I'm like, actually, no. Most times, most families are overwhelmed because they got grief, number one. And then they're going to want to hold on to things longer than what they really intend to because of the grief. And then you've not identified what things were important to you as opposed to the, unimportant things. So then the caregivers, the loved ones, just end up with all of the stuff. And then a lot of times they're like, well, Susie, I'm just going to back up the dumpster and to my driveway, and I'm just going to chuck it all because I don't have time for this. I'm working full time myself, and I don't have the brain capacity to do this right now. So I tell families, I said, you guys start going through it sooner than later. just make it so that it doesn't come to a crisis, or it doesn't come to where your family member has passed away and then you're having to deal with all of it. Have the conversations early as much as you can. Talk about the items, make notes about items so that everybody has a plan of what to do with it.
That sticky note underneath the piece of the little statue that this belongs to Susie, so that when the time comes, the separation's already done. What is your thoughts on throw rugs for elders?
No. I've seen so many people trip and fall on them, and they're like, Susie, I just love my rugs. And I'm like, yeah, but is that more important than you're having a broken hip? And then, as we are working in the older community, so many people have so many issues after they break a bone. And then the coming back from that is so difficult.
Yeah.
So I just recommend to them, I'm like, those are one things that I really hope that we can let go of all the throw rugs and things that are going to be in the way, especially if there's a walker or a wheelchair or anything like that. I mean, I had one client that I worked with in this past year. She lived in a senior community. When she moved into it, they had the perfect laminated flooring and everything in there. She had a walker, and sometimes she would use a wheelchair. She insisted on that facility putting carpet in there. And I talked to her about it. I said, I think you're going to regret this, because as things progress with your illness, you're going to have a hard time. And it was cream white color. And I said, you're going to have a battle with just keeping it clean all of the time. And I have not been in there in the last 6 months, so I don't know what it looks like, but I was like, oh no. But all I can do is just give my advice and say, hey, this is what I've experienced with other clients, and this is what I recommend for you. And, people are going to do what they're going to do. But when you make things harder on yourself, when you do things like that are counter, it just doesn't work for what your future is going to look like most times. So
right, rubber sole shoes on a wall-to-wall carpet is bad, and then socks on a laminate is bad. So you really have to really think about where your living space is and what's safe. I had a loved one who wasn't even 60 yet, and she got a hip replacement, and I'm like, take all your throw rugs out of your house. And she's like, why? I'm like, you're not gonna be able to lift your leg up when you're walking enough to get your foot up to clear that threshold. So take it away, because some people actually perish because they've fallen in their own home and can't get to that help that they need. And not to scare anybody, but it's so important to get rid of those. They look pretty, yes, but get rid of them, especially in a bathroom when you're getting out of the shower, things of that nature. Get rid of them.
I just had a family member tell me yesterday, she said, Susie, what are the resources for me to help have somebody come in and stay with my loved one during the day while I'm working? Mm-hmm. She goes, because he just fell the other day, and he was there for several hours by himself. Yes. Because I was working. Yeah. And I said, I hear that all the time. And bathrooms are a big one where people fall and they hit their heads on the sinks and the toilets. And it's like, oh my goodness. And so I try to get as many resources in there as possible, so they have the information, and then try to do the accommodations as needed, and what's going to help them with their health and safety.
I want to thank Susie for her wonderful information. I am constantly taking notes. She has a wealth of information. If you have any questions, let her know down below. We want to bring her back because she is just fantastic. And I had mentioned in my announcement video that she was on 2 episodes of Hoarders, and she's willing to come back and talk to us about that. So if you want to know all about the ins and outs of that show, write it down below with your questions for Susie, and she's going to answer your questions and was willing to talk about the Hoarder Show on another video. Caregivers, we'll see you next week for another video with Susie, and we will be talking about organizing tips that don't take a lot of time that every caregiver can definitely use. So until we talk again, just know that you are loved, you are appreciated, you are needed on this planet, and I wish you blessings.